My name is Corinne Frostick, and I'm Charlotte Frostick's paternal grandmother. Charlotte died on May 9th of 2022 from suspected fentanyl. I say suspected because there really wasn't, to my knowledge from the investigation, any fentanyl found on her. She had it in her system, but she did not have it in her mouth, hands, eyes, nose, or on her person. And to have been definitive with that, there should have been a second autopsy, but she was cremated before that could take place. So, yes, she did have fentanyl and norfentanyl in her system, but we don't know exactly how it got in her system. Police in the newspaper and police would say there was fentanyl strewn all over and powder residue everywhere. But that was also refuted later on in preliminary court proceedings. And the fentanyl that they said was like sprinkled all over the bedspread where Charlotte and her mom were sleeping was actually powdered sugar because it was my son's 26th birthday that day. And he had powdered sugar with donuts with Charlotte before he left for work that morning. He left for work about 4:30 or so because we live north of San Francisco, and he had a job in the East Bay, the San Francisco Bay Area. So he was at a job site 2 hours away when he got the call from his Charlotte's mom that she was unresponsive and being taken to the hospital. And they had a cat, a really cute Mancoon kitten that Charlotte just loved, and Jody loved Charlotte as well. And I mean, he ran freely throughout the apartment, and he was fine as well. I would assume if there was as much fentanyl as had been indicated, that the cat probably wouldn't be doing so well either. My son, had called me at work that morning, and I thought he was calling to, my kids always say, Happy Birthgiving Day, Mom. And I thought he was calling to say that, but it was 11:16 a.m. And he said that, I asked if I was sitting down. I said, no, I'm rushing around at work. And he said, I think you need to sit down. And I'm like, why? And instantly you get that feeling and that anxiety in your stomach and chest. And he said he had relapsed on fentanyl, and I started going off on what, when. He's like, Mom, that's not important. You need to get to the hospital. Charlotte's at the hospital, and you need to get there because I'm waiting for a lift to pick me up. And so I rushed out of work and sped up the freeway. It took about 20 minutes to get to the hospital. And as I, went in and was waiting to be taken back into the ER, Charlotte's maternal grandmother showed up, and so they led both of us back arm in arm into the room. Madison had her head down and was sobbing, and Charlotte was on a table with a intubation tube in her throat and blood all around it and laying there. And I knew instantly as I was walking in that she had passed away. And frankly, when I was walking in, I thought, I'm too old to be bringing home a toddler from the hospital, because I figured that I would probably be, I thought I'd be walking away with taking a toddler home. And instead, that wasn't the case. my initial reaction was I was pretty angry. I think I said some pretty unkind words to Madison, and I apologized the next time I saw her, which was 2 days later when they were let out of jail because she was taken away shortly thereafter by the police that were at the hospital. And I asked the nurse if they could keep Charlotte there, that my son was 2 hours away. And he would, he was getting to the hospital as soon as possible. And the nurse was kind of snarky and said, well, we don't wait for drug addicts or some nonsense, just not much sympathy. And I said, he is her father and he has a right to say goodbye to his daughter. And fortunately, they did keep Charlotte there and he was allowed to say goodbye. They also didn't want to let my husband in. They were, no one person in at a time, and she already has had 3 people in. And I said, well, I'll go out. And they still wouldn't let him in. And then when we were outside in front of the emergency room, I told them, I said, you have a right to say goodbye to your granddaughter. You go in and insist. And if you don't, I will. And he's a little more quiet than I am. And he did. And he got to say goodbye too. So it was good that, we got to say goodbye to her. Two days prior to her death, she died the day after Mother's Day, and that's the Saturday before we were celebrating Mother's Day with Evan, and with my mom. My mom wasn't doing so well. Her health was really declining, and I had told all 3 of my kids, if you want to see your grandma alive, and if she may know you, you need to go. And so Evan, Charlotte, and my husband and I went down to see her, spend the day with her. And Charlotte had had a well baby checkup the day before and got shots and was very cranky and, really just very clingy to her dad. And he was so patient all day long. I mean, when I had young children, I don't remember me ever having that much patience with you take care of your child and everything. I was a loving mom, but yeah, I was really amazed at his patience and how gentle and sweet he was with Charlotte. And she just wanted her daddy. I would try to take her and she'd come to me for a second and then just reach for her daddy. And I remarked to my husband that night that, wow, Evan is such a good dad. And you could just tell the love between the 2 of them. And that was the last day that we saw Charlotte. Two days on the day of Evan and Madison's arraignment, where they were actually released from jail because they weren't ready to file charges, I couldn't be at the courthouse because I was in San Francisco with my mom and stepdad, taking her to see a heart specialist who put her on hospice and told her, this is it. And had to pretend like everything was okay because I didn't want to upset my mom. She passed away 12 days after Charlotte, and I spent, every day with her, kind of pretending everything was okay and being strong. And I had to be strong for, my other kids, my 14-year-old granddaughter, and for everybody. And she was 15 months and 1 week old when she passed. And, she was, like I said, she was at the pediatrician office that Friday and hitting all her milestones and markers and, doing everything that a normal, healthy 15-month-old would be doing. Walking and starting to talk a bit. And she's a little more reserved than some children. I mean, she wasn't unhappy or anything like that, but just a little more cautious than I would say. I have the same age Actually, Thursday, my daughter's daughter was exactly the same age as Charlotte when she died. And she's a very gregarious, outgoing kid. And Charlotte was a little more cautious, a little, around people she didn't know and stuff. But then she'd warm up and run around and stuff. The pediatrician didn't know that there was anything, didn't suspect anything, with her mom. Both Evan and Madison went into rehabs in 2019. Evan did 2 60-day stays. Madison went into a different one, and I think hers was quite a bit less time than 30 days or less. I asked Evan how I would check with them regularly. You know, hey, how's it going? How are you? You doing okay? How's your mental health? Things like that. I mean, I spoke with him about that. I mean, he did lie for sure because I point blank asked him in the court proceedings they were drawn out over 2 years. So they both parents were in jail for 2 years. They were charged with murder too when they were finally charged 2 months after Charlotte's death, and facing 15 years to life. They were being tried under like a new, I don't know, interpretation of a drunk driving law or something that was really meant more for drug dealers as opposed to parents. That's why it's so much harsher than like involuntary manslaughter, which is something I could understand. And they were both being tried together. So it wasn't, they always would appear in court together, which I didn't understand that either because, I mean, Evan was at work when Charlotte died. I'm not, they both had relapsed. And he probably was the one because he was a breadwinner. Charlotte's mom was a stay-at-home mom. He was probably the one purchasing the fentanyl. So, but I don't know all those facts. The one thing that I knew when Charlotte died from, like, not the first day because I was in shock, but like the second day, I remember sitting in my living room, still in shock, still in just overwhelming devastation, and like, how could this have happened? And I knew I had to find my faith because I had to believe that Charlotte was sitting up in heaven with Jesus and was laughing and happy. So that is one really positive thing that's come through all this. I've really found faith and a community of people that are very supportive. And I think that has helped me more than all of the therapy that I've had since, is finding faith and community. Somebody I'd known, but not well, more of an acquaintance than a friend, had reached out to me, I don't know, a few weeks after Charlotte died. And I was really depressed. And, my mom was dead. Charlotte's dead. I mean, I'm usually like out of bed early sort of person, and it'd be the weekend and it would be like 10 o'clock and I'd still be in bed, and which is, never been like me. And she kept texting me, hey, I go to this church. You should come with me sometime. Out of the blue, texted me. She knew what had happened. And I just kept refusing and refusing. And finally, after a few weeks, several weeks, I said, if I go, will that shut you up? And she said, yeah. And so I went. And I instantly felt like I was home and, had put in a prayer request. And the pastor called, and poor guy, he got like a 2-hour earful from me, and he told me to go to a women's Bible study, thought it would be good for me. And I thought he was crazy, because I was angry. And I'm like, why would God allow this? And, he explained things a bit to me. I still didn't understand it. I still don't understand, but I do believe God had a plan. But I'm digressing. The women's Bible study, that the group that I found there in the fellowship, has just been so amazing and so healing and cathartic for my healing process. And I think my son, who, going back to him, he seems to be finding some maybe hope or peace through some, you know, getting in touch with his faith as well. When my sister, this is the type of kid he was, when my sister passed away from breast cancer back in 2009, I think. Evan was like 13 years old, and he actually said, he actually came up to me and said, "Mom, why are you so sad?" And I'm like, "My sister died." And he's like, "Her work here on earth is done. God took her home. She's better in a better place than us, and we'll see her again." And he was a child, but I think he was onto something even, back then. So, yeah, yeah. I mean, he was a good kid and sweet, very sensitive. I didn't know until his first round of his addiction and going through treatment and stuff and the therapy that went along with his rehabilitation, that how prevalent, how deep rooted the depression was in him. Because to all outward appearances, he seemed like a pretty happy-go-lucky kid and very friendly, very, very outgoing, he was a talker. He could talk to anybody. I always thought if he had been a better student, he would be an attorney because he just had that gift of gab and persuasion and charisma, sort of like. We were the type of family that we had dinner together every night, around the table. There's no TV. There's no, unless you had to have a really good excuse not to be at the dinner table until, high school when they had their different activities, and sometimes that prevented it. But that's just, who we are. We're very, pretty close-knit. Kids were active in sports, Evan in football. And when his senior year, he was like 5'10", and he always wanted to be like tall. My husband's 6 foot, and his older brother's 6'1", big, burly guys. And Evan was 5'10", and he played center for his high school football team, varsity football team, and maybe 145 pounds. He was a little guy. And it terrified me seeing him go against 250-pound linemen. And there's my little, my baby. But he did it. And he was the starting, center for their team. And they went to playoffs. They lost, but, they made it into playoffs. And when at the awards banquet, Evan's coach, who had been my husband's JV coach 36 years prior, said that, and this was his retiring season, said that in all his years of coaching, he's never seen a kid play with so much heart. And that was Evan. That's just, who he was growing up. He would, be playing outside or whatever in the neighborhood. And, he'd be often at we had a few elderly neighbors. He'd be at one of their houses just shooting the breeze with them, just visiting and, talking about his day and what's going on in their day. I mean, he just was, it's not really always normal behavior for a young boy or, Not common. Yeah, a teenager, and that's just, that was Ev. And he had friends. It's just, I don't know, he was very sweet.
And you kind of lost him too.
I have lost him. I mean, I'm fortunate because I do talk to him almost every day. Or, at least, not every day, but almost. And because he's still alive. But he is in prison. And he's not a criminal. He's guilty of being an addict. And I think a more just sentence would probably have been lifetime of treatment and giving back to the addicted, the community, rather than 11 years in prison with, hardened, repeat criminals. It's breaks my mother's heart. I mean, I'm grieving for my granddaughter, but I'm grieving for my son. I'm grieving, yeah. From the day of Charlotte's death, the media, it's been a media circus, a media frenzy. We had reporters showing up at our doorstep the day after she died. We were all gathered in my backyard. My 14-year-old granddaughter was all of a sudden, who is, a surly teenager, is sitting on my lap with her arms around me. That hadn't happened for a couple of years, and my other kids were there and their significant others and my husband, and we're all, just in shock and disbelief and just trying to come together as a family. And there's a knock on our front door, and it's a San Francisco investigative reporter from San Francisco, 50 miles to the south of us, knocking on our door to see if we wanted to give an interview about Charlotte. And it's a good thing my husband answered the door, not me, because it probably wouldn't have been very nice. And then offering like a candlelight vigil. I'd always seen candlelight vigils for people who have passed due to various circumstances on the news, and I didn't know it was kind of a way for them to get more viewers and to, play on people's, on other viewers' sympathies. And I don't know, I just felt it was like so taking advantage of us and our grief. I didn't want it on public display. And front page in the local newspaper with pictures, and it was every time the kids appeared in court, pictures taken, put it in the newspaper. I mean, I have a kind of unusual, there's not any other Frosticks in Sonoma County unless they're related to me. And, seeing your name, it would be different if it was Smith or Jones, but Frostick in the paper all the time, we still live there. We still, work it was just judgment on the comments. People would say terrible things in the comments on the paper, on Facebook, all, you name it. Like that morning of Charlotte's death, I had posted on Evan's Facebook page, happy birthday, can't wait to celebrate with you tonight. Because we were having a family dinner. That's what we do on birthdays, cake and family dinner and presents and, and somebody said, oh, the mom must have been partying with them and, judging me like they had to have known what's wrong with them and talking about Madison and Evan like they should be castrated, they believed, and sterilized. And I mean, just like really horrific things. And they should never see the light of day. And these were kids who loved their daughter so much, and she loved them. And it was evident when we saw them. And to be judged like that. I know Charlotte's dead, and one person in particular, Justice for Charlotte, and she didn't know Charlotte. And she threatened to say that she had something on our family, and she didn't. It was just so nasty. And I don't even know what Justice for Charlotte, what is Justice for Charlotte? To this day, I don't know what it is. Because we can't bring her back to this earth. And what would she want as justice? Her parents to be healthy and happy. From what I was told by Evan went through 3 public defenders. We couldn't afford, a $100,000 retainer with the price going up from there for this type of case. And so he was left to public defenders. And the first one we liked, and we thought she was doing a lot of work for Ev, and indicated pretty much early on, within the first few months to 6 months, that the prosecuting district attorney was working on a plea bargain and would have it for the next court. I went to every court case except when I had COVID, was always there to support Evan and Madison, mainly Evan. Usually my husband was with us. Sometimes there'd be a whole gallery of family, but even when it wasn't, I was always there. There was no plea bargain, so it got drawn out. There was no bail, even though Evan had a good pay. He made more money than I still make now. And I'm at the end of my career, and he was at the beginning worked for a union and installed glass like on the Salesforce Tower, and had a really good paying job. And there was no bail for either one of them, so it took 2 years for the case to kind of resolve. And at the 11th hour, there was 2 years in, there was a plea bargain for voluntary manslaughter and 11 years as opposed to 15 years to life and murder too. And Evan said, "I'm not a gambling person." His public defender did not want him to take the plea because he didn't think it was good given the circumstances and that Evan was at work when Charlotte passed. But Evan said, "I'm not a gambling man and I don't want to gamble with my life." So he took the plea, and he is in a state penitentiary. I had called the district attorney's office, shortly after Evan was formally charged, and called them about victim advocacy because their website had a big thing about victim advocacy and helping victims. And so I called to ask what services were available to me. And they asked who I was, and I said my name and that I was Evan's mom. And I was told plainly, "We have no services for you. You are the mother of the defendant. You're not a victim." And my response back was, "Well, Charlotte was a victim. She's dead. My son and his girlfriend are victims because they're the parents." I said, "Who else is not, who outside of them is a victim but grandparents? I'm a grandmother who lost my granddaughter." I ran into the district attorney last fall at a fentanyl event in our local area. And I was walking around the event. I was actually hobbling with a cane because I just had a knee replacement a few weeks before. And it was my first time venturing out of, going on an adventure outside the house since the surgery. And I had a girlfriend with me, and we were walking around the event. Facing Fentanyl was there, Andrea Thomas and Michael Fiore and some of the local nonprofits. And so we were just walking around seeing the other booths and so forth, and then there were going to be some speakers, and Andrea and Michael were speaking. And one of the nonprofits has a large poster of Charlotte. And it was the first time because she couldn't display it for 2 years because I said, she cannot be, public, cannot go public with any of this. Anyway, when I came back over to sit down, she said, "Oh, that lady over there was asking about Charlotte and wanted to meet you." So I hobbled on over to her and, introduced myself. And she just said her first name and didn't ring a bell with me at all. I had never seen this person face to face ever, And I just thanked her for, and she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. What a tragedy, da-da-da." The things that you would say, normal things. And then the event started, and she got up to speak, and she started speaking, and I'm like, "Wait a minute." I turned to my friend and the lady at the table. I'm like, "Who is she?" It was our county district attorney, the head, speaking, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack, or or fumes were going to combust out of my head, because she was speaking about being compassionate and showing empathy for addicts, and that compassion, not incarceration, and treatment. And I was just like, I mean, I could just feel my blood pressure, and just like I was shaking, my face was bright red. And so when she got done, she was just she wasn't the main speaker. She was just kind of a beginning, introductory speaker. So when she got done and the next introductory dignitary got up there, I hobbled across the room to her, because had I known that it was who she was, I probably wouldn't have introduced myself and been so, oh, thank you for your sympathy. And I just thought, how dare her even utter Charlotte's name from her lips after what she put our family through. And so, I walked over to her and I just said, can I have a word with you when I want to hear the speakers? And so if you're leaving, can we speak? Can we, and so she came over, and yeah, I called her on her compassion and empathy, and she indicated that I didn't know the facts of the case, and I indicated to her that you didn't know my son. You don't know what you've done to our family. And yeah, it was just, it was just so, I don't know, the gall, I don't know how she lives with herself, quite frankly, because she didn't have to drag our whole family through. She didn't drag our family through, but our family was dragged through along with Evan as the collateral damage and all this. She could have done a plea bargain and just let it go quietly away, even if he ended up in prison. It didn't have to be like this. It didn't have to be so with the media playing. She could have, because I am pretty sure that all the media was kind of fueled by her. I can't say that with certainty, but I'm not a betting person, but I would bet money on that one. Suddenly in my county, there was a big fentanyl push, and fentanyl was really, right at the time of Charlotte's death, was really gaining a lot of momentum, and, where you'd hear about it on the news. So, I understand that the awareness it's really skyrocketed. But like 5 months after Charlotte's death, I'm talking to my stepdad driving up the freeway and home from work, and there's a big billboard about fentanyl in our county. And then 5 miles later, there's another big billboard, all supported by the district attorney's office, mind you. A different billboard about fentanyl. And then on the radio, my husband and I wake up to local news station and fentanyl ads playing. Every day I'd wake up to another fentanyl ad. And Evans and Madison's attorney asked for the, one of the ads it was a made-up ad. It wasn't based on fact. That a kid was playing in a playground and touched something and, overdosed, but was able to be revived. And there were no facts. This was just a made-up scenario playing in my local county shortly after Charlotte died. But I'm not allowed to talk about anything because that could taint the jury pool. It was a real double standard. This story really isn't about me, and I'm sorry I'm talking so much about me. I really didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about Charlotte and Ev. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, it's just spend fun times, Glenn. Fun times. This could happen to anybody. We were a good family, and did all the things involved in our kids' activities. Our kids were always playing sports. We were what you call the typical American family, and this could happen to you. Addiction doesn't discriminate. It happens to people growing up in adverse circumstances. It affects all socioeconomic classes. It doesn't discriminate just the addicts. There's collateral damage. Our family, the parents. The only one who's not suffering is Charlotte. They say I'm strong. I don't feel strong. But I just have to keep going on. You know, my son tells me, take care of yourself, Mom, because I'm the one who puts everybody first besides myself. Because it was always, there wasn't time for me. It was always for the kids, for the family, for, you know. And he tells me now, you have to be well, Mom, because I need you. You know, I'm kind of his lifeline to the real world now. So I just have to take better care of myself and live and try to be happy. Be a mom and a grandma. Got another granddaughter on the way in May, so that'll be the fourth granddaughter. So we're blessed. Cursed, but blessed.